this amazing series over the last couple of years. So it's been really fantastic to see. And I'm actually really excited about how we're doing it this year, because I think we're kind of on the precipice of, something new in terms of, I guess, a breakthrough in creative thinking around what media is and how it can be used and what it does and what it means to us. And using this kind of interactive, multi-layered platform in this innovative way, I think is really what it's all about these days with creative thinking and media. So I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm really thrilled to be speaking to our amazing panel today with Skye, Jacquelyn, and Sarah. So as mentioned, I'm currently a creative producer. I create and produce television projects, films, podcasts, conferences. Previous to that, I was an academic. I was the academic dean at a couple of media schools in Canada. So happy to be here and seeing it from both ends. But I would like to maybe start by having our esteemed panel, if you wouldn't mind, I'll call your name, and if you could maybe introduce yourself for us, that would probably be a better idea than having me to try. So why don't we start with Skye? Skye, are you there?
Hi.
Please introduce yourself for us and tell us a bit about who you are.
Cool. My name is Skye Deluz. Originally born in Winnipeg, moved to Toronto about 11 years ago. And I am a creative director at Rethink in Toronto. It's an agency that has that's kind of across Canada. We just opened an office in New York. So we have an office in Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, and now New York. I've been with the company for 4 years. Before advertising, I kind of dabbled in fashion design for a little bit and kind of found it wasn't really like flexing my creative muscles as much as I could have. So I kind of explored advertising and art direction and design and kind of fell in love with it. And here we are.
Great, and very impressive with that growth in such a short amount of time. That's really great. Okay, thank you so much. Jacquelyn.
Hi, yes, I'm actually Skye's partner. So I also work at Rethink. I'm associate creative director, and I'm a writer at Rethink. For those who don't know, art directors and writers usually are paired off as creative teams, and we kind of solve problems together with each of our expertise kind of combining to solve a different creative problem. So that's why we work so closely together. I started in advertising kind of out of a fluke. I was finishing up university and realized I didn't want to be a teacher, even though that's what I'd always kind of imagined I would be. And I didn't want to be a lawyer, even though that's what people were telling me to be. And then someone really coincidentally was like, hey, what about copywriting? That sounds cool. And I'd never ever heard of it before. And it ended up being like the perfect job for me. So I got really, really lucky in that way, and kind of why I'm excited to talk to everyone today. Because if you hear about a really cool industry with all of these jobs earlier on in your career, you won't detour too far before you find the career that's right for you.
And before we move on to our next person, your background is very similar to mine. So I think there must be a lot of truth to that, but we can cover that after, but very interesting. Okay, Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm co-founder of Wedge Studio and creative director based here in Montreal and Los Angeles. What does that mean? I sort of run the vision of the business here. We're a team of about a dozen. We're people who exited the big agency world and sort of came together to work with new generation brands or legacy brands who sort of need to evolve and level up for, I guess, a new era of culture. I graduated in 2009, so we're going a little way back from the Ontario College of Art and Design. And when I was in your shoes, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I really loved painting. I was making lamps in my parents' basement. I loved the environment. I was like a smorgasbord of many things, and I was super academic. I kind of fell into advertising at that time because for me, it was the perfect blend of business and advertising, or sort of creativity and big ideas. And I sort of just gave it a shot. So I tried many different things, and throughout my experience, I met a lot of amazing people who opened up my world and my periphery wider than I could see. And so through meeting people and learning about what was even available as a job in the world, I sort of ended up as a copywriter working on IKEA campaigns at my very first job. And I honestly never thought that I would be doing that. But a creative director told me that he thought I would be very good at it. And so he gave me that chance. So I bopped around to different agencies throughout my career. I was fortunate to work on a lot of amazing global campaigns. And then when I felt like I learned enough, I sort of left to work with lots of more different people. And I ended up doing this and opening the studio. So I have a lot of empathy for where you're at right now. And I think it's just amazing. Like, you're sitting in this position where you feel like you have to make a decision, but it's so awesome. All of the people that you just like haven't even met yet who are sort of like waiting for you. And I think that's been a big part of what's led me to where I am today.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And the current president from OCAD says hello. I mentioned to her that I'd be speaking to a grad, so hopefully she's tuned in. This is really interesting, and I want to maybe start with kind of the most obvious thing here, but all three of you are entrepreneurs. As much as you are creative people. You've started businesses, you've founded companies, and you started things. I do think that today's entrepreneur is maybe a lot different than the industrialist entrepreneurs of many years ago. I think that technology has kind of opened up a whole new path. It's kind of like, starting your own business was the same as maybe starting a rock band, back in the days, before. If you were a creative, smart, kind of happening person, you'd start a band or something. But now people seem to be starting businesses. Tell me about that entrepreneur journey. Why did you choose to start your own businesses as opposed to working with some of the bigger firms or the more established legacy brands? Whoever wants to start.
I don't mind going for, I think it was for me after, I'm super thankful to my experience that I had in advertising, working for different amazing agencies like, Zig back in the day, which was like one of the first Canadian agencies founded by women, or like Sid Lee in Toronto and Montreal. And I think, after a while, you just you do it and you learn so much, and then you kind of you gain the Super Mario mushroom and you move on to the next level. And so for me, you just found yourself in a place where you're like, I learned a lot, but I kind of just want to do it my way. And I have a perspective on this of what I think it should be. In my journey, I sort of met a really amazing design director who had a great perspective. And so we sort of joined forces. It was kind of by accident. I don't think for me, this wasn't intentional, like I had a master plan. I think that's sometimes how most entrepreneurs just start things, is sort of like you take a crazy chance because you feel like, oh, I can put something out in the world that is just doing it your way, not comparing it to anyone else. You've gained the skills and expertise, and you kind of just want to take a chance. I think that's what it is for me. And I was I didn't have the grandmaster business plan or all of the, everything all figured out. I think you kind of need, even to start something new, you need that little bit of component about being okay with what you can't see. You need a little bit of crazy, and you definitely need a lot of naivete. That's been my experience. And I think sometimes it's really easy to look at sort of people and their titles or what they do and think that, everyone has it all figured out. But I think whether you're a founder or an executive creative director, like a CEO of a company, there was a journey to get there, and everyone still has a lot of learning to do once you are there. I hope I'm answering your question in a way that you're happy with.
I am. Don't try and please me. Yes, but
yeah,
you're right.
I think sometimes you just want to create also a space in the world for an experience you didn't have. And so for me, that was also female leadership. I was never in a place where there was a lot of female leadership around me. I can happily say that most of my leadership here represents, different kind of group of people. So I'm going to stop talking now and let someone else talk. But yeah, that's part of my experience, I would say.
I was just going to say, I love that last part of your answer and kind of looking at this panel and seeing kind of like really strong women, creative women, like, you know, it's really kind of inspiring. And when I think back to kind of my younger self and like knowing I would be surrounded by such like, you know, diversity and, you know, feeling included and seeing, you know, people that look like me now kind of moving up higher. And when that wasn't kind of the case when I was younger, is just such an amazing feeling. But sorry to stray away from your question, but I personally don't have that, you know, experience of building my own business because, you know, I've been with this agency and prior to that, kind of working with like, you know, an agency is already set up. But I was thinking of like a creative way to answer your question and still kind of participate in that. Being a creative person, whether you're, you know, at an agency, freelancing, you know, own your own business, you as a person is a brand and a business. So once you kind of get into this industry, you start to think about how you, you know, need to advertise for yourself, all of the projects and kind of passion projects you work on, all the things that you want to put out in the world into your book, all the awards you could, you know, get, like those go towards your brand and your business and how you can kind of further yourself in this industry. And so whether you own your own business or not, you kind of do because you're your own business in a way.
Okay, good answer. Let's hear from Jack, if you don't mind me calling you that.
No, yeah, that's great. Yeah, I kind of a similar answer to Skye. It's we work with an agency, but we, you know, take every project on our own. And as you know, creative directors and associate creative directors, we're kind of building and driving ideas forward. And it's sort of like a mini project every time. And so you kind of have to solve it in new ways and approach it in new ways and make sure you're developing who you are as like a well-rounded machine so that you can, you know, address all these different problems every time. And it is really inspiring to see the change from when we started and all of our bosses kind of looked one way, and, you know, had certain types of ideas, no fault of their own, just who they are. And now more and more people are getting promoted and moving up who are more diverse backgrounds and able to kind of validate more diverse perspectives and ideas. And that's what's really exciting about kind of working in this industry and being who you are, kind of bringing who you are to the table, as like Skye was saying, as a brand.
Well, that's actually a good segue to my next question, because I wanted to, and perhaps it's something that you think about a lot, or maybe that you've forgotten. So I'll try and remind you, but if you could pinpoint sort of your one favorite thing about working in this sector. I know what it would be for me, and that's after many years of trying different sectors. But if there was one thing that really tops the list, what would that be? And we can start with you, Jack. What's your favorite thing about this sector?
It's every single day is something different. One day you have to do a TV commercial and you have to solve a script for a brand. And that's one idea. And then the next day you're working on a totally different brand and you have to, you know, find a way to activate in culture and connect with people, you know, on TikTok or wherever it is. And then the next day you're doing something else on a different brand. And so you're always being challenged to do something totally different. Literally every single day. And so it never gets boring and it's always something kind of challenging. And I think I took art in university, and I'm a writer now, but I studied fine art and English in university, and creatively speaking, advertising is way more challenging than fine art ever was, because you're solving problems that are bigger than just yourself. It's not just expressing yourself or kind of putting on paper what you believe or see. You're thinking about, you know, strategic problems and brand problems and cultural insights, and you're bringing all of those things together to have a creative idea, and those change every single day. So it's just never boring, and that's my favorite part.
Okay, Sarah, Skye.
So it's funny because there's so many things I love about what we do, and it's just so fun every day, like Jacquelyn said. I think my absolute favorite thing about working in this field is probably the people. It's amazing from when I started to now, the kind of people that I've like pulled into my circle along the way has just grown, and like my life is so full and so happy, and I feel so inspired and more creative because of these people. So some of them are my best friends that, you know, we go to cottages every summer together, and we push each other, and we're also like-minded. I think you hear that a lot when people talk about the people in advertising, is that we're all very similar in that, you know, we're funny and, you know, we have similar interests, but everyone is so unique. And I think that's the thing that I love about it, is that you gain all these different perspectives, and you're just surrounded by, you know, the nicest people also. So not only are they creative, but they're also nice. There's this one policy that we have at Rethink, and it's like in our book, it's one of our hiring policies. It's like no assholes. So we don't hire, you know, jerks or people who aren't collaborative or like to work with people. And so I think with that in mind, and like a lot of agencies, I feel like have a similar policy where, you know, you just want to hire and be surrounded by, you know, amazing, you know, kind people. And it's just been great. And I love the inspiration, and how it's like pushed my work, and how I like to kind of explore my creativity is through the people that I kind of connect with at work. And then it's a great part of the job.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, I would say the work that I do is more focused on brand. And so where that's a little bit different, and one of my most favorite things is like, we really help brands clarify what they stand for in the world, like their distinct point of view amongst all others. And you're like, oh, that sounds like a really big thing. But I think for me, it like really goes back to like storytelling. That's one of my favorite things about what we do, is really cracking like the unique narrative, what you stand for. Like when people see you waving your flag, what are the emotions that they feel also? So really going to that very deep foundational level and like clarifying that North Star. It's like, it's amazing, because once you do that, you know, you can really see how it affects teams that work within a big organization. They're like, this is what we're a part of. We're so excited to move on to our next level. Or that provides the foundation then to like design the beautiful world around it, like visually what it feels like. How does it come alive in advertising? How does it come alive in a space? How do we tell that story through photography or through video? So that like the nucleus of it and cracking that vision is like definitely part of, it's like my favorite thing, because it sort of like unlocks everything. And so like, yeah, that would be my favorite thing, I would say.
And I think you point to a really interesting phenomena that we're in. People often think that we're living through a technology revolution, but we're really living through a media revolution. Because if you think about how media is ingrained in almost everything that we do, and when I talk about media, I'm talking about what we're doing now. I'm talking about the advertising that we see. I'm talking about how we connect through still images, video, and now interactive. Media is attached to everything. It's attached to education. It's attached to commerce. It's attached to politics. And in many ways, you know, the three of you are helping to shape and drive that. How have things changed the last couple of years with regards to your sector? Like, what do you see as the biggest trend that is kind of impacting what you do at a profound and fundamental level right now, whether it be technology related or, you know, societal?
It's interesting. When I started, all of the agencies had recently split up into, there'd be like the regular mass agency, and then there'd be a separate digital agency. And when I started, it was this process where they all just realized everything is digital. We don't need a whole separate agency to tackle that anymore. It has to be integrated. So it was this really actually kind of like an alarming part of time to start in the industry, because agencies were literally closing because they were folding back into the like full mass agency. And it was because everything was media, everything was digital, everything had to speak on so many different touch points. You can't just do something, you know, in out of home or in a print magazine anymore, because it has to be able to connect with people online and in digital spaces as well. So we've definitely been a part of that like evolution, with the sort of time that, I mean, Skye and I started at a similar time. So we just kind of hit that moment when everyone was realizing it's all the same. And so I think, and sort of to Sarah's point, as I say that, it doesn't matter what you're communicating in, you're always telling a story and speaking on behalf of the brand and trying to connect with people. And so if you're telling a TV spot, that's like a standard example of a story. But if you're trying to connect with someone online or get people to engage with some content on social, that's a type of storytelling as well. So it's become one skill set that you adapt to multiple mediums instead of everyone thinking about it as entirely separate things. I mean, in my experience.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's very interesting. Skye, Sarah?
I think for me, what I've noticed has changed in like the last, like, let's say like 5 years. So when I like sort of started at Rethink to now, like obviously you see kind of trends pass in and through, our industry and things become popular and you kind of have to tap into that. And something that a lot of, I think, agencies are doing now is trying to break through of like the traditional kind of advertising lens. And so like you had your TV spots, you had your banner ads, you had your radio ads. And now it's like, how do you even through those formats twist and hack, the platform or the way that you're delivering the message and like even go, it's kind of like cerebral in a way. It's like you kind of like have to like think outside, like within that box, like how do I kind of deliver this message in a unique way? And so a lot of agencies are kind of using this digital kind of way into ads in a really different way that we probably wouldn't even have thought of, 6-8 years ago. You're like, oh, I didn't know that I could like do a radio ad in such a different way, or like slow it down so like you can only listen to the radio ad when you like speed it up 5 times, or like really twist like the technology that the ad is being delivered through. So I think that's really cool. And it's like it's really fun to watch like new creatives kind of come through and like think of something that you would have never thought of in a million years. And yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, Sarah?
No, it just reminds me of when I used to work in advertising. It was like this constant pursuit of like using different available medias to us in like a different way, or like flipping it on its head, sort of how, Skye was describing, is like, how do you play with it in an interesting way? I think no matter what, whether, you're working in brand or you're working in advertising, like I remember when I was working with a strategist who taught me all about like a term called cultural anthropology. I was like, oh my God, it blew my mind. And what that really means is like, just like the study of people and how we live in culture here and now. And I became obsessed with like just consuming media and trends and like why things are trend and all of that kind of stuff. But I think like it all just comes back to having a really close cultural anthropological beat to like how people really live now.
Yep.
Where we spend our time, like how we're, what do we care about? Like, what are we concerned about? Being aware of different social movements. And I think everything that we create like needs to have that, I don't know if you hear that, my dog is running towards me, needs to have that level of like a consciousness or awareness, whether we're putting, statements out in the world, campaign ideas out in the world, sort of thinking about like, well, who's the person on the other end that will receive this message? Who are we creating this for? What do they care about in their own unique like culture? It could be a fashion brand, it could be IKEA, it could be a food, like whatever it is. And how can we put more positive messages out there, thought-provoking messages out there, greater sense of messages that are about a greater sense of community? I think like that's a huge responsibility. So it's like we might use different medias to tell stories, but like what is the actual story or thought that we're putting out into the world? I think there's a huge responsibility there. So yes, be aware of all the things, but like, I don't know, cultural anthropology. When I heard that, it changed.
I love
everything.
that.
Yeah.
Well, you
It
talk
made me-
about, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it made me think of and both what you and Skye were saying is, I remember being told you have to be more interesting than like a YouTube video that someone's friend made. And that was, you know, however long ago. So now it's like, you have to be more interesting than TikTokers, and you have to be more interesting than HBO, because people are getting to choose where they're spending their time, and they have to choose to spend some time with advertising now. And so we have to kind of be connecting with them in a true way through cultural anthropology and insights that people are actually engaging with because they want to, because, you know, only so many people are watching TV in the traditional way where there's ads. Most people skip YouTube ads. So we have to do something that's as interesting as what they're seeking out online to watch, and be more interesting than like someone, you know, Chris Pratt dancing on TikTok or whatever. Like, we have to beat that.
Or
Yeah.
even more like deeply connective, you know?
Mhm.
Because sometimes when we say, I had a creative director that says like, either make it more like entertaining, more educational, or more like, so you're like learning something, you're gaining information, or more like deeply connective, like, oh, you truly understand like what is at the heart of this.
Mhm.
And it was Michael Murray. He was my first boss. He was like the best, and he taught me a lot. But yeah, when he sort of taught me to think in those 3 different ways, and it was super helpful. But it's so much, it's for me in my journey, it was too much pressure to be interesting all the time. I want to be boring sometimes. Okay, leave me alone.
Yeah, let us be boring.
That's
I want to
okay.
be boring.
And that could be the next trend. Maybe people want to be boring for a little while, because it's a lot of pressure to be
Underrated
interesting.
boredom. Underrated.
Absolutely. There's some stillness. You know, I do some work with Deepak Chopra and his daughter, Malika, is a good friend of mine. And they've kind of really,
Low key name drop. I love
Yeah,
it.
but they've really pioneered, just saying, but they've really pioneered kind of this medium, and sort of, you know, raising kind of this idea of how do you use this platform to actually create stillness, as opposed to, you know,
Yes.
making it hyperactive all the time. And it's, you know, it's really fascinating, because I think our consciousness is changing. So we're gonna throw to some questions soon, but I have one question as we transition to that. If you could give some advice to either, you know, your past self when you were just starting off in this industry, or if you could give some advice to someone just starting, what would be sort of the one key thing? And then we can flip over to our audience questions. So whoever wants to start that train.
I'm gonna be super basic, and and say, if I was talking to my younger self, just being okay with failing. I think there was a lot, and I think this happens more often than it should. But you know, people starting off in this industry, juniors and interns, and people kind of just, even if they're coming in from, you know, already having a different career, that happens a lot too. It's like, it's not just young people. But there's this like immense pressure that we put on ourselves. And I think maybe a long time ago, that was kind of the world where you know, you had to stay very late and you had to kind of put in your weekends, but that isn't the landscape now. And in fact, you know, a lot of agencies are like, you know, mental health, number one, you know, let's turn our computers off at 6, let's not work weekends. And so that pressure, I think, from a nationwide, like, or like kind of like a larger landscape in the industry has kind of softened. And yet we still have this pressure on ourselves to kind of like go above and beyond and really, and push ourselves to burnout. And if I could talk to my younger self, I would just like shake her and say, like, you know, don't be okay with failing, because like, it's actually like, the biggest lessons I've learned were through the mistakes I've made and like the kind of failures, and you get that tough skin. Yes. But like, I think I would have just been a bit kinder and softer to myself, because you're going to get there, you know, it's one way or another, you're going to get to like where you want to be, and just have fun. You know, it should be fun. You know, you should think of this job with a like lens of levity, because what we do is fun. It's like we're making ads and we're, you know, making people cry or smile or whatever. But yeah.
I think that's good advice all around. No matter what job you do, we should be a bit easier on ourselves. Okay, what else? Who else wants to jump in here?
I was having trouble thinking of like my one piece of advice until Skye said hers. And it's always trust that you'll have another good idea. Because this industry is kind of about repetition. And I think that's another difference between like practicing art and then making ads, is you see one thing out in the world, whether it's a TV spot or an idea or whatever it is, and there was 100 in the process of getting to the one thing that was produced. And you have to come up with, 5, 10, every time you're meeting your creative director, you have to come up with more. And if you feel like you found the one and it's the only good idea that you'll have because you're scared that you won't have another good idea because it's hard to have good ideas, then you're going to hold on really tightly to that one and not be open to the other ideas and the other solutions that are out there. And if that idea is wrong, not because it's a bad idea, it's probably a great idea, but it's not on strategy, it's not right for the brand, or there's some political thing where like you can't say that type of idea to the client this week, maybe next week, not this week.
Yeah.
Then you have to be able to come up with more and really always trust that if an idea dies, you're going to go sit down and you're going to have another one. And then like having that sort of like firm belief in yourself makes it a lot easier to kind of go through the process of reps in this industry, which then becomes better and you become faster and you have more ideas. And but really believing that you'll always have another good idea is, I think, the best advice I'd give myself.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? Because you talked about reputations, right? Is that what you meant? How important is that and how does that work really? I mean, talk to me about that.
I meant repetitions. But I can talk about reputations.
Well, sure. If it's, yeah, I mean, how, in this kind of industry where we're all talking to each other and telling stories, I imagine that it happens internally as well. But how do you build your brand and your reputation, or how important is that?
It's definitely important. It's in Toronto in particular, and I should say Canada. Any of the big advertising markets, Montreal, Vancouver, they're small industries. So people and your bosses know people. And so it's kind of two-pronged. On one side, it's what Skye was talking about. No assholes. Like you are there to work, you're there to do your job, you're there to learn from the people around you. Everyone has good ideas, everyone has good advice. Whether you're the creative and there's a strategist and accounts person in the room, just because you're the creative doesn't mean that you have the best perspective on the creative idea. There's so many different perspectives that are going to help you become better and help the idea be better. And so being really like open to working with people and really collaborative is like number one in terms of building a good reputation as a person. And then the other thing that's really important is your actual work. And so I think maybe something we haven't like clarified enough for people who are starting is you get hired in advertising if you're applying for creative roles with a portfolio. And so that's when you're a student, it's spec ideas. It's ideas you just come up with and you mock up and you put in your book, and they don't have to run in the real world. You just come up with ideas and show your work. And then once you're in the industry, your portfolio is the work you've actually created. And so that's your reputation, is like your portfolio, which is a website of all of your best work. And that shows like what you've created. And there's a lot of like, I don't want to say like Scout's honor, but like you can work on a project and you get to decide how much that was your idea and how much you can really take credit for it. So when you put it in your portfolio, you have to be able to say, if I'm in an interview and someone asks me about this, I can say that, I had the idea and I did X, Y, Z, or I produced it and I made this happen in this huge change. And that's why I kind of feel like it's my work. And so there's sort of a kind of reputation in that regard as well, in terms of what's attributed to you and what you kind of claim as your work. And it's like reputation, but it's also just your portfolio and like your hits. And that's how people hire you, is based on the work you've done. Oh, you've done that great thing for Heinz. That means that you'll be able to do this great thing for Coke at my agency. And so it's really about kind of getting your book together and then making sure that people think you're not a jerk.
Yeah, I would also just want to add to that. I don't think it's only about the work. I think it also matters, like who you are as a person really matters. Like, and what do I mean by that is sort of like your life experiences. When you're just starting, like you're like, I don't have a portfolio. Like I have drawings. Like what do I, and like that's totally fair. But I think about, Mimi on our team, and she was an intern this summer and we brought her on full time, and she was a camp counselor for many years. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, tell me about your experiences. And she shared all those summers with us. But what it said to me as someone who, was opening the door, I'm like, she's an amazing communicator. She really likes to mentor young people. She's really great at problem solving. Like, And there were so many soft skills, like obviously in addition to, you know, she had great spec work and all that kind of stuff, but like she's just starting, right? But you could really see in the way she articulated her thought or the things that she cared about. For me, I was like, I want someone like that to be a part of my community that I'm building. So opening up and like being vulnerable and like sharing who you are, the way you think about the world, it's a big part of that too. I
100%.
think it's like equally important in my
Yeah.
perspective.
Especially at the beginning. I always say that servers make great advertisers because you have to be able to talk to people, and like there's like dead space on calls where you have to like make everyone feel comfortable, and that you have to kind of get them to trust you really quickly. And I found that like being a waitress for a few years gave me amazing soft skills for just like the social aspect of meetings, which is kind of like the camp counseling thing. It's like you don't know what skill is gonna, you know, show up in advertising years down the line or in your career years down the line.
I just wanna
100%.
talk on- Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, 100%. I was a bartender and a server my whole life. I may do it again. Who knows? But,
Yeah.
I just wanted to tack on to what Sarah said, because I completely agree that you know, it is, you know, obviously you have to show that you can, you know, have the skill to do the job, but a lot of it is who you are as a person and your perspective and what you can bring to the table, just because, you know, you're you. And I agree with that so much that when I was doing my first interview for an internship, I had like several spelling mistakes in my portfolio that were pointed out to me during the interview. And the night before, I was like up at like Kinko's, like printing it and freaking out. And I just like missed these spelling mistakes. And it's kind of like the one thing that you're supposed to not have in your book. And the CD that I was interviewing with was like, you know what, like, you're cool. I like you. We vibe. And like, I'm, you know, like, who cares about the spelling mistakes? So it's like very much like important to kind of be a good person and present yourself like authentically. And that will kind of help you so much.
That's so good. And you know, traditionally advertising's been or marketing advertising has been a very, very competitive field where, you know, if you believe some of the mythology of a show like Mad Men, you know, versus what we're talking about now, you know, it's changed quite a bit. So that leads me to, I think we have our first sort of audience question, which actually is a question I get every time. So it's the same question, but I think the answer has been changing over the years. But here's our question. How did your parents react when you told them you wanted to pursue a job in the creative field?
Disappointment. Disappointment. My parents are like, just for context, immigrant parents who worked really hard. Academics were always super important in my house. I killed it in the grades. So when I told my parents like, oh, I actually want to go to the Ontario College of Art and Design, they had no reference of someone who like was successful in that sort of field. It was so foreign to them. So like a lot of disappointment, I would say. But then as I started like working, they were like, oh no, like you can make a living and you can have a great life and do all of these things. But yeah, they just didn't know. But like, yeah, disappointment. But then like you get over that hump and then it turns into like unwavering belief and support. So that was my journey. Yeah,
I would agree, because my parents also, you know, academics so important. I think until I was like 15, you know, my dad believed I would, you know, be a doctor. And I I think it wasn't like so much disappointment. It was more like they were worried. Like they were like, because they had no idea, you know, what, you know, working in advertising was. And so they were just kind of worried. And my mom actually came to my graduation open book night, and it was at this place on Queen Street, downtown Toronto. And like, there was like a red carpet rolled out in front of the door, just because I think that was the venue. It just did that. And my mom showed up and she was like, oh, it's like the movies. And she's like, from that point, thought that advertising was just so like elegant and cool. And so thank you, street venue with the red carpet.
I had sort of the reverse where my parents were always just kind of like trusting that me and my sister were just like, we got good grades, so they were like, oh, they know what they're doing. And then I detoured in university, and I was like, I think I might like take some time off and go like paint in Toronto and waitress and just like see if I can be an artist. And that's why my parents were freaking out. They were like, what did our academic daughter do to become like a starving artist? And then I realized that that actually wasn't my personality. I was like, oh, I'm actually kind of type A, and that's not really like where I fit in. And then had this sort of completely coincidental suggestion from my boss when I was a waitress to go into copywriting. And that was sort of like a relief for my parents, but they had no idea what it was, other than it was a 1-year Humber copywriting program, and I would, get an internship afterwards. Like that was about as far as they could imagine. And then even years into my career, I showed my parents work that I'd done, like, here, I made this commercial, and here I made this. And then I remember I was talking during COVID, I went home and I was working from home in the kitchen. And my mom was just like quietly listening to one of my calls. And she was like, you do all of that? I thought you just like wrote the thing at the beginning. And she didn't realize that like you're part of the entire creative process. And like, you're really just responsible for bringing the creative vision from the initial idea to the writing, to the execution, to the casting, to the production. You do the whole thing. And that was like 5 years into my career where my mom actually realized what my job was.
Right.
She just they had no concept.
That's the point. So I've been asking this question for 20 years, and actually this is the same kinds of answers actually. So maybe things haven't changed as much as I thought that they have, I guess. Okay, this has been really fantastic for me. We're going to sort of come around to a close. And I thought that what I would do is I would give everybody the opportunity just for some closing thoughts. Like, what's the one big idea that you want to leave everybody with, or our audience, or who we're speaking with? Now's your time. So I don't know, whoever wants to start, but just the one kind of takeaway that you think would be really representative of what we talked about, or your career, or whatever you want to share.
I think my big takeaway is that advertising is like this gigantic industry, and there's only a couple roles represented here. But there's accounts people, there's strategists, there's clients who run the brand on the other side of the industry. There's all of our production partners. So you can be a film director or a photographer, or a designer, or an illustrator, or sound design. Like there's so many roles that are necessary for advertising, and they kind of feel like when you're in high school, you're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to like do the score for a movie? And then you think, I'm never going to be able to, get into that Hollywood gigantic industry. How do you even start? How do you go into writing music scores for films? How do you even do that? And then you stop. You're like, there's no career path to that. I don't understand. And advertising's the career path for that. That's the sort of middle business version of these, your big dreams. And you can leapfrog into it, or you can get into advertising and realize this is actually exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And so I think any creative role, or even if you think, oh, I'm not that creative, but I love being around creative and I want to be an accounts person and be in business, but I don't want to be like corporate. There's a role for that in advertising. So I think I just want everyone to like look into all of the roles of the industry, because it is so vast, and like a way to be creative and kind of fulfill your dreams without having to like make it big off the jump. You can still kind of fulfill those creative ambitions in a different way.
Okay, very good. Skye, Sarah?
Yeah, I'll just kind of tack on to what Jacquelyn was saying, and feeling fulfilled. Like, I think when I got into advertising, I was like a bit worried that this was like 9 to 5, this is me being an adult and kind of crushing my creative dreams, like I don't know if this is like an old kind of thing, but people who are creative go into advertising, because the creative part of what they want to do didn't work out. But I don't believe that at all. I think like I, was a painter, I was a fashion designer, I did a bunch of creative stuff on the side. And it's funny to see those parts of your creative like self seep into like your work in various different ways. So being able to like work with illustrators, or being able to like shoot photography for a project and be the photographer on the project, or work with like filmmakers. And like, it is super creative. And like, I feel fulfilled in all the different things I was doing before, but now into my job. And like, it, for some reason, feels more rewarding, because it's like, I've hacked the system. And like, I feel like for young people, going into this, you can feel that way too. So if you have a passion for fashion, or if you have a passion for, painting or film or music, those things are baked into this job as a creative person in advertising. So it's almost a way to like, see those dreams come to life in a way where you can be successful and kind of grow into your role and kind of feel fulfilled. So that's kind of my parting note.
It was very good. It was very good. Okay, Sarah?
Yeah, go for it. I just think like, go for it. You have an interest, swan dive in there, go for it. You are like everything is actually quite possible. You're just like, you're at the start. Like, you know what I mean? So like, there's a million things you don't know. There's a million opportunities that are there for you. You don't even know that they're there yet. Once you start and you start meeting people and you start learning about that new thing, like the path is going to go like this. At least that was my experience. So if today you're like, I don't know what it is, but I know I'm really into that thing, that's cool. Swan dive into that thing, like go for it. And like read books and look out at the world, people who do interesting things, write an email to them. People respond. I think if you really go for it and you'd really be surprised, like people do show up for you. And there's so much that's impossible to know today, but once you start, there's like so much for you to learn. And like the one big thing, because I didn't get to answer the question of like my younger self.
All right.
But like, I think it's really like, for me, it was people, like learning like the value of relationships, because again, you can meet someone and it'll change the course of everything. So I would say like, open up to people so that they can also show up for you. Go for it. Ask for what you want, or put yourself out there, and yeah, it'll work. Just gotta start. You go dipping your toe in the pool, that's all this is. Too much pressure. You're just starting. It's all good.
That's fantastic. I think this should be a regular show. We should have a weekly show, just the four of us, if you don't mind me tagging along, because I think this would be very therapeutic for everybody in the industry. I think the thing is too, and I want to thank all three of you for your time, because just from my perspective, having spent time kind of leading the academic programs and then working in the trenches, really in the trenches as a creative person, starting from scratch, is that we need to, build kind of a public perception of respect again around what we do, the same way people look at doctors and lawyers and things. And I think that starts with kind of respecting ourselves with what we do. And that's how you kind of build it sort of externally. Because I think what we do is important. It's not just about selling products. I mean, we're changing the way people think. And the potential is so great for really, we can change the world probably a lot faster than other sectors. But and I think it starts with just really recognizing what we do, having respect for ourselves. And I think that's going to grow outward. So I want to thank you very much for teaching me a few things today and being a part of this. And hopefully I'll bump into you somewhere out there, online or on the street. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're going to throw back to our leader here.
Yes, thanks guys. That was really interesting. And it's funny, I started in advertising as well, but as a strategist. So our careers are quite similar as well. And, I always wanted advertising, just not the creative side. So thanks again, everyone, for sharing your stories and offering up some advice. And I thought it was very informative. And just for everyone out there, if you want to learn more about the different careers in the creative industry, head over to Creativefutures.ca. We do have some salary expectations and some schools that offer different creative programs as well. Our next session is next month, December 7th at 10:30 a.m. And we'll have a brand new panel of experts to share their story. Again, thanks for coming out, and thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You.